Cuoine Usha agus fáilte. Hello and welcome, it's Misha Amy. I am Amy, the Crafty Kylock, and today I'm back in the kitchen cooking one of possibly my favourite ever dinners, which is Irish stew. So if you don't know what Irish stew is, it is a stew or like casserole type thing that is made with beef and vegetables. Now everybody will make their stew differently. There is no one size fits all recipe. Even my stew will change from time to time when I make it, just based on whatever's in the fridge, what I've maybe forgotten to get, and what I need to use up. So today we are making not only an Irish stew, but it will be an Irish stout stew. So a very common menu item in a lot of Irish pubs that serve food would be Irish Guinness stew. Now that's great, and I have done that myself before, but Guinness is full of gluten. And if you saw my Barn Brack video that I did a little while ago, you will have seen that recently I've been trying to stay away from gluten, but there is an Irish brewery that does gluten-free stout. Yeah, gluten-free stout. So for our wedding, actually, I had known about this stout, and when I was talking to the baker who was doing the cake, she had never heard of gluten-free stout, and so this was a massive revelation for her as well. And at the time, I knew that there was certain supermarkets that stocked this particular stout and this particular brand, which is 9 White Deer. And 9 White Deer, this is the bottle of Stag Stout that they have. Just a note to say that this isn't a sponsored video, I just really like this stout. I love the bottle, love the packaging, love the stout as well. But they were sold out everywhere. I rang about 7 different Super Values, which is one of their main stockists, and all of them were out of stock. I ended up emailing their customer support, desperately asking when it would be back in stock because I needed it for a wedding cake, and they got back to me straight away. They were super lovely and said that there would be some coming in a couple of weeks, but if I couldn't get any, to let them know and they'd get it shipped straight to me, which is just so lovely of them. So yeah, I'm delighted to use this in stew, and I might do it in future recipes as well, because one of our favorite things to eat is chocolate stout cake, and that was the flavor of cake we had for our wedding cake. So I might make that in a future video. So if you'd like to see chocolate stout cake gluten-free, drop a comment below and let me know, and I'll put that on my list for future Crafty in the Kitchen recipes. But for today, we're making stew. So what you're going to need, and what I'm putting in my stew today, is stewing beef. So stewing beef is diced beef. Normally when I get diced beef anyway, you can get diced beef or you can get stewing beef here in our supermarkets. I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but stewing beef tends to have a bit more fat on it from what I gather. Also going to need carrots, an onion or 2 onions depending on how much stew you're making. I just only have 1 onion in the fridge today, so that's all I'm putting in. I also have a very large sweet potato because I like sweet potatoes, and I think they go really well in the stew because of how sweet potatoes are. They tend to break up and then they kind of just add to the texture of the soup and they make it nice and thick rather than actually staying together in chunks of sweet potato, if that makes sense. What I also do is coat, I know it's very common to coat the beef before you fry it in like flour. So what I use is corn flour, because 2 reasons. I use corn flour because I find it is better at, again, giving a nice thick stew soup. I don't like a thin soup with stew. I really like a thick hearty stew. And also it's gluten-free. So there's that. You're also going to need some butter. So I have a block of Irish creamery butter here. You can use oil to fry, that's fine. You can use like olive oil or something like that, whatever you have. I just like frying in butter because I just feel like it tastes nicer. And also I find with oil, you kind of get an oily residue on the stew, which is fine. It's just my preference is to use real butter. And that's all you need. You do need some herbs, and just herbs, really, just herbs and pepper, because we don't really do spice over here. But I'll go through that when I get into it. So first we're gonna prep the veg. I'm gonna use a bit of kitchen magic because I really don't like prepping veg. So now we have veg prepped. That's been put aside and ready to fry in a few minutes. First, we're going to take our stewing beef, and I have 2 packets of 600 grams. So I am using 1.2 kilograms of stewing beef, which, as you can see, is just like diced beef still with a little bit of fat on it. What we're going to do is take the stewing beef and put it into something so you can shake it and coat it in the corn flour. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking this Tupperware lunchbox that has a lid. I'm going to throw the beef into here, and then I'm going to shake it and coat it in the flour, and then we're going to fry it. Going to get my corn flour ready, but also just season the beef with some salt. I'm just going to give it a bit of a shake around to loosen it up. So you don't want to have too much in, you just want enough to coat the beef for frying. This is just to give a light coating on the beef. Every piece doesn't need to be evenly coated or anything. It's just to give a coating. So I have this glass bowl here to put the beef after I fry it in, because I like to put the veg in on its own for a second and then add the beef back in. So high. Okay, trusty wooden spoon. And now we're getting the butter. If you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you'll know that I use quite a bit of butter. So I'm going to use a good chunk of butter here for frying, but then I don't add any more. There's nothing else going in here. I would use less if I was using less beef. It's just I'm using a very large amount of beef today. And you can definitely use less butter, like this is just the amount that I use, and it's just to prevent the beef sticking to the pan. So that is pretty much all melted. It's starting to sizzle, and I'll add in the beef. So I do know that this is not how everyone makes their stew. I personally like to braise the beef first, set it to the side, do the veg, and then add it back in. I know that when I was really small, my mom used to make it by putting the beef and everything just into the soup or the kind of stock, beef stock and veg, everything just got put in raw and just cooked, whichever way you want to do it. I just prefer doing it this way. I find that it seals the beef, you get a really nice flavour from the beef, and I don't know, it's nicer to me. I'm not saying my mom's stew isn't nice, but I just prefer how I make it. Here you're going to want to toss it so that it doesn't stick to the bottom, but also so the other sides of the beef get browned. So just let that sizzle for a minute. So turning back on the heat, first thing I add back in is the onion, because I want that to just soften up first before I add the rest of the veg. And there's still enough butter there to help with the onion. Now that's softened up a bit and it smells really nice. I'm going to add in the carrots and the sweet potato. Mix that up well and then just add the beef back in. All that buttery goodness. And now we're going to add the stout. This gluten-free white deer stag stout. Whoop. Oh, that stout smells so nice. What I'm going to do as well is actually go ahead and add more liquid. So I'm just going to add some water so it comes up over the stew. It's nearly there. The water's at that level. It just needs a little bit more to come over. So this is a pint of water. And I'm adding, I've maybe added around about 400 milliliters extra there. So the stout itself is 500 milliliters and then I've added an extra 400 milliliters of just water to it. Now what I'm going to do is bring it up to a rolling simmer. While I wait for that to simmer, I'm going to add in some herbs and I suppose some spices a la white ground pepper. So into this little bowl here, I'm going to put about an even teaspoon white pepper, about a quarter teaspoon of black pepper, a full teaspoon of thyme, another full teaspoon of rosemary, and one more full teaspoon of parsley. And then I'm also going to add some garlic. Oops, that's a lot of garlic. I've added about a teaspoon and a half of garlic there. I only meant to do one. So that's my little herb mix there. And that's going to just go straight into it. And just a little bit more salt. One final stir, and we're just waiting for it to boil. And then when it starts to bubble like this, give it one final stir. And then probably the most scary thing is you just turn it down, a very slow simmer, put on the lid. and then you leave it alone. What I'm gonna do now is drink my cup of tea. Oh no! So what I'm gonna do now is drink my cup of tea, let that simmer away there. Every hour or so, I'll check on it and just stir it. And in about 4 or 5 hours is when we'll eat it. Controversially, or maybe controversially, I do not put potatoes, the white potatoes, into the stew. I know a lot of people do. A lot of people will put them in from the start. A lot of people will put them in kind of for the last hour and they soak up the juice. I just don't do that. I do the potatoes separately because I like to have mashed potatoes with stew. That might be controversial. What do you do? Do you put your potatoes in your stew? Do you do them separately? Do you have them at all? I would be interested to know because I know my grandmother puts them in and they are delicious. Now don't get me wrong. White potatoes that have been in stew, that soak up the stew juice, are absolutely delicious. I just don't put them in my stew because I tend to make a very big pot of meaty stew and then have the potatoes separately. It's just the way I do it. So I'm gonna come back in about 4 hours and see how we're getting on. Also, that blue pot was a set that we got as a wedding present from my aunts and it's really, really nice. It's my first time using the really big one. I've used the other sizes, but I just haven't made stew yet, so yay. And also they match my hair, which is just wonderful. Okay, so it's been about 4 hours. I have come down earlier and given a stir. I did move it to the smaller ring because the big ring was just giving it too much heat. So I moved it on to a smaller ring to just simmer, and the entire house smells amazing. It smells like stew. So I'm gonna have a look at it now and then gonna do some of the white potatoes for some mash, and then we'll have dinner when those are ready. The beef, and I'm just gonna try, but that is done. So now I just need to make the other potatoes to go with it. So there we have it. That is my Irish stew recipe, and it smells amazing. The mash is really nice as well, and the beef is just falling apart, which is how I like it. very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you let me know if you do try the recipes. I love hearing when people are trying the recipes and just see how they got on, see if they did anything different. If you don't want to use stout, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to use stout. You can use a beef stock instead of stout, and just again have like 500 milliliters of beef stock, and then just top up the rest with water. You can just use water as well. I just like the depth of flavor that you get in using either beef stock or a stout. I don't always have a stout on hand, but either way it'll be tasty. Also, as you can see, the sweet potatoes have like disintegrated into the stew, just made it really, really soupy. Just really, really tasty, really, really warming, especially now that winter and it's getting colder and you just want to be cozy. I'm gonna go eat my dinner. You have a lovely day, and thank you very much for watching. Slán go fóill. I will see you in the next one.